Hello and welcome back to the Privett Park Legends podcast. Today I'm joined by a Borough legend who made 205 appearances, earning promotion in '85 and winning the Hampshire Senior Cup. Welcome, Ally Unitt. How are you doing, Ali?
I'm doing good, thank you.
And so the news we had in the last week is about maybe an idea when the season can start. It's looking about the 19th of September. Do you think right now we're on progress to do that?
Well, yeah, I think so. With the games that they're getting played, I know that the footballers have all had a little bit of a mini break already, and now of course they're crushing lots of games in. But yeah, it still gives them that little bit of break, and I would think that we're probably ready to go at that stage.
Do you think that the social distance, of course, have meant that many stadiums will have to reduce their capacity? Do you think clubs will be able to survive with the limited capacity they have, or do you think most clubs will be all right with it?
I think particularly the smaller clubs, it's going to be a real problem with limited capacity. It seems limited capacity is causing problems everywhere, whether it's in the hospitality sector or you know those sort of areas, entertainment. So I think it's going to cause a problem for the smaller clubs. Although obviously when you go right down to the very small clubs with the smaller numbers, then maybe there's not going to be that issue. So yeah, it'll be the sort of lower league clubs, I think, that suffer heavily.
And a lot of teams have had a longer break than they would have planned to. Do you think there'd be anything different about pre-season or even the start of the season? Do you think there might be more errors or more injury prone because players are just not used to, haven't played to the same intensity as long?
No, well, I'd have thought that thinking with the break that they've had, they now they can get back and start training, and before they start their season, you'd think that fitness-wise they should get their levels back to where they would want to be for a normal season. But in terms of the contact side of things, there's probably going to be a few more injuries, but I would think that they should be all right in terms of their fitness levels. They've just got longer to prepare for things.
Mm-hmm. And then, so moving on to yourself now, how have you been coping over lockdown?
Yeah, I've been very good, thank you. I retired at the end of last year, so having been a PE teacher for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I retired in August last year, and so this is my first year of retirement, so it's been a bit strange. And I was just getting everything sorted, getting into routines, playing a bit of golf, which gets me out and keeps that sporting link. But of course, then we get the lockdown. So, but I've been okay with it. I've got daughters that live nearby, and they're still around, so and keeping me busy. One of them still can't drive, so she expects me to take her everywhere and run her around. So yeah, some things haven't changed really.
And now, so moving on to your footballing career, do you remember your first childhood memory of football?
Yeah, well, my first real memory, I don't remember doing much as a youngster, other than very young in terms of up to about 10 years of age. But what I do remember is I lived in a little village in Warwickshire, and we had a new village policeman who came along with a couple of older lads who were both footballers. And he set up a school football team. So we played in the primary school. So that's my first memories really, were playing in a little school football team. He then took that next step and set up a village team. And so they're my earliest memories of actually playing organised football. Don't remember anything before that, as such.
And was it more sort of playing it rather than watching it? Do you remember going to a particular football team, or was it just interested in only playing it, really?
Yeah, at that age, it was about playing. And then I think, I'm just trying to think, 1966, obviously the World Cup final, Sheffield Wednesday had become my team that I supported. So I was about 10, 11 years of age. So I was getting into that side, but there wasn't as much football on TV as there is now. So, couldn't stay up late and watch it on TV. It was often on Match of the Day, which was later. So then one or two of my friends in the village, we all supported different teams. So living in the Midlands, one of my mates, his parents supported Villa. So we started going to see Villa. I remember seeing the great Manchester United team at Villa Park with Best, Charlton, Law, back in the 60s. So that was something in terms of going and watching. And then Northampton had a rise to the old First Division, and they went up in consecutive seasons. And I think they went back down in consecutive seasons. But my dad used to take me to Northampton matches because that was quite close, and he was quite keen on going at that point in time. So they and then gradually, as I sort of was becoming a stronger Sheffield Wednesday supporter, my dad would take me to Sheffield Wednesday matches, usually when they were around our area, so Coventry, Villa, Wolves, Leicester City, places like that. So Oxford United, I remember when they were in the lower division. So so it was, but for me, it was more about playing. I enjoyed watching and obviously supporting the Wednesday, but for me, it was about playing.
Was it in the end watching the football, watching like Sheffield Wednesday and other these First Division sides, or was it playing in your local side that really got you into football and wanted maybe even to see it as a future career path?
Good question. I think obviously seeing the football as youngsters in those days, we didn't. It's not like youngsters now that sort of grow up with football and their parents are sort of getting them into academies at the age of 6 years of age or something. There was none of that. So you played your football for fun. Obviously, I enjoyed my football, but I in those early days, for some reason, I played left half. If anybody knows what that position is anymore, but basically midfield. So they were my early days, and then I enjoyed playing the football. But obviously, I think probably watching those sort of great players and also watching the Wednesday teams over the years, that sort of built up my enthusiasm and love for the game. So I think it was a combination of the two, to be honest.
And you said about parents trying to get kids into academies. Do you think that kind of stuff is sort of stop the growth of players, and that you try and get them in a young age rather than build their love for football?
I think it's how it's run. Obviously, as I said, I was a PE teacher for 40 years. So I've obviously witnessed the sort of parental side of football through the school programs, and I think that sometimes if whoever's back in the early days, I think coaches weren't qualified. They didn't have an understanding of the game. Kids would often come to me and say, "Oh, I can't come to training tonight because I've got football training for my other club." And I say, "Oh, so what would you do for, in your football training? Would you 5 laps of the field to start with, and then we have to do shuttle runs, and then we have to do press-ups. So it was all very much about fitness, and these we're talking 12-year-old kids. Whereas, you know, and I'd just say, well, you needn't worry about that, because all we'll be doing is ball work. You know, we'll be doing skills and games and fun activities, but ball work. So, but I think that's probably changed. I don't have a close link with it anymore, so I'm not sure. But I would assume that times have moved on, and that the quality of the coaching, whether that coaching sometimes takes the sort of flair out of players, I don't know, or whether the flair players will come through anyway. One would hope so, but yeah, I think that you'd hope now that the old ways of people working with kids has moved on, and that, you know, it's about ball work, because we've seen what the European sides and the South American sides have produced, and with very little coaching, they produce fantastic players over the years. So, yeah.
And how exactly parents, I don't know, watching football, their children being football has changed from, I don't know, when you were a child or when you first started teaching PE compared to when you essentially retired?
I think the main change, I think there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm for people's, back in my day when I was young, there was obviously an enthusiasm for us to do well. The parents wanted us to do well. So, and it gradually moved to a situation where I think all the parents felt their children were going to be the next professional footballers, and the aim was to get them onto an academy, or, you know, Saints Academy or Pompey Academy, or signed by those clubs, as opposed to developing their own child. I think the feeling then for some parents was that, yeah, okay, my kids have made, my kids made it now, 12 years of age and signed with Pompey. You know, and really that is obviously the start for a lot of them. They got a long way to go, and it wasn't just about the skill level. It was about, the other things that go with it: the attitude, the commitment, the focus, and they all develop differently. So, and then if we move it along to my last 5 or 6 years before I finished, which was when I was still, there's still an element of that, but I think maybe parents are a bit more realistic. So those about what might happen in the future, that is promoted enough that the percentage of youngsters that actually go on to make a professional career is very, very small. So I think there's a bit more reality about what would happen, rather than my lad's going to be a footballer and that's it.
And do you think when you see kids or young adults come through, do you think there's a bit of a non-league prejudice with it all? Because people I've spoken to in the past, like Tony Marnie or Peter Mullis or Gary Durant, all mentioned how that when they were playing as a youngster, the one team they wanted to play for was essentially Gosport, and maybe if they could get to that level, Portsmouth, but Gosport was the main thing. Do you think kids don't have that same attitude where they only want to strive for the top clubs rather than being proud to play for a non-league side?
Yes, I think it has become like that. For me, it was I lived in the Midlands, and so my sort of immediate ambition was to see if I could play for Banbury United, who was Southern League side. So that was where I was thinking that I would be trying to aim for. Whereas, yes, I think now it's all about the big teams, and unless they've got parents that are sort of taking them along the non-league route, take them to Gosport or to Havant and Waterlooville or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it's very much about the professional sides, and that's where children see their ambitions lie.
Do you think maybe that's a role of non-league clubs to do that too. I don't know, encourage to get more youngsters through the door, whether that's for free tickets or whatever. Or do you think there's just more of an attitude general needs to change?
To be honest, I've lost a lot of connections with the non-league. I still live in Waterlooville, and but over the years, whereas I've got 3 girls, and they went down tennis routes, and so I sort of drifted away from my football links to working with them, and that's been the last 20 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I've lost connections, but I must admit, even in my PE teaching, we would sometimes back in the day get sort of tickets or invites to take kids along, or encourage children to go to matches of, but I'm not so sure we used to get those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Although I know more of the clubs used to get out into the community. So it was a few years back, but obviously when Sean Gale was at Havant Waterlooville, Sean would often get, I'd talk to him, and he'd get on the talk about using our school for football camps in the holidays, etc. So there would be more of that happening than ever back in the early days. So maybe there's a different way of, what I don't want to do is say, no, this is, this isn't happening, or that's not happening, and I'm not factually correct with it, because obviously I don't have those links anymore. But it was different in terms of what they were doing. They were getting out more and running coaching sessions and holiday camps, etc., etc.
Speaking of Sean Gale, of course, he's now the new head coach manager of Gosport. Do you think that's the right fit? Do you think they've got the right person? You said about community guy there, clearly getting involved in schools, and one of the big things with Gosport has always been about community club.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll be the right man to take that forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's important. So, especially for a club like Borough, and Sean's obviously had a lot of experience at non-league level as well, with Hampton Waterlooville and his non-league management side of things. So I think he's got the perfect fit there, or Borough have got the perfect fit. Someone who knows about football, they know about local football, because I think that's another factor that's going to be important for teams like Gosport. And he's got that experience as well. So so whether you've got, I don't know what the money situation is these days, but obviously some non-league clubs have a lot of money, so that's okay, because if you've got those connections, and you can see players that are being released by clubs or are doing well on the non-league scene, then you've got the money to attract them. But if you haven't, then you've got to look elsewhere. So Sean's obviously been a local lad. He has that knowledge as well, so I'm sure he'd do well in the job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so now going back to your childhood, was school football so important to you getting in as well into football more, or was it just more a local side set up?
So as I said, I played at primary for probably a year or so. And then it was village football. And then I went off my secondary school, didn't do football. So they had their aspirations a little bit higher. We would do rugby. It was mainly grammar schools that did rugby back in those days. But my secondary school also did rugby. So I played rugby at school, and other sports as well. But it was, so my football was village football, and I played for the same little village from whatever that 10 years of age through till 16, till I left and went into Southern League football.
Did you ever think of going into rugby rather than football? Was it always football that interested you more?
I love football. I love my football, and I did all right at rugby, but I didn't have the same sort of desire for it and eventually, as I got a little bit older, I didn't have the same sort of success with it either.
Mm-hmm.
So much as I enjoyed it, and it was football for me, and that was where I really had the passion.
And then, so what was your first side you played for in the Southern League?
So just before that, so it all links in, but at 15, I'd been tracked by a Derby County scout.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, back in those days, you didn't. I'd moved from left half. The goal scorer had been moved from, had gone to another team, and for some reason, someone thought that I looked like I could be a decent goal scorer, and I suddenly went from scoring about 10 goals in the season at left half to scoring 40 and 50 goals a season as a centre forward, and apparently I've been tracked by this Derby County scout who didn't let on. He just watched, and then one day approached me after a game and said, "We'd like to take you to Derby. We've been watching you for the best part of the year, etc., etc." And so that was, and I was 15 when I joined Derby, signed for Derby on schoolboy level, and he also had connections with Banbury United. A friend of his was the manager at Banbury United, and he said, "Look, do you know what other football do you play?" And I said, "I only play under 16 league level football." And he said, "I think you probably need some adult football, so maybe we can sort out with you to train with Banbury United." So they didn't have a reserve team or a youth team; they just had a Southern League team. They played in a midweek league, so they had a squad of about 20. And so I went to Banbury United, I trained with them, and the next thing I know, they're saying, "We think you're okay to start playing in our midweek league," which was, I think I was 15, and going on 16. And then I made my Southern League debut at 16, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what was the quality difference between that youth level and the midweek league to then the Southern League?
So the midweek league was just a way of keeping their squad players fit and with a regular game. So we'd play against teams like High Wycombe, Wycombe Wanderers as they are now, Cheshire, Marlow, Wokingham, have all got good sides. But I think it was a way of keeping. But for me, it was adult football.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just a slight drop down from Southern League, but there were a lot of players that were playing Southern League or the Isthmian League. I don't know whether it was called that in those days, but they would have been the players that were playing in that midweek league. And for me, it was getting experience playing in adult football. It was a bit of a jump up, but obviously they obviously felt I did okay because they moved me from that into the Southern League team. So I got a little bit of experience. I played a few games in that first year when I was 15, and then a few more. And when the following season I played some more. So it's part of the transition. Sorry.
Signed to the reserves or like the youth side of Derby and start playing for them. Was it soon after?
So no, I was there as a 15-year-old, and I was just signed on schoolboy forms. So I would go up for my holidays, and I stayed up there until my GCE exams, O levels in those days. So I was there as a schoolboy, and I remember actually spending my 16th birthday up there. So no parties or birthday celebrations other than a phone call home, and but I was at Derby, and it was fantastic because it was the year that Derby won the old First Division. I was involved with the likes of Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, we would often train with their first team. They would put everybody together for early part of the training. So, you know, mixing with people like Colin Todd and Roy McFarland and, you know, Archie Gemmell and players like that was fantastic experience. And then I was all set to join when I'd done my O-levels. And I suddenly got a letter through the post saying, like many children do these days, I got a letter through the post saying, sorry that, you know, we're unable to find a place for you in the club, and we're, you know, releasing you from your schoolboy forms.
Was that big,
so
shock at the time?
Yeah, it was a big shock at the time. The Derby County scout, Mick Walters, his name was, he was friends with Peter Taylor. They'd played together as youngs when they were in the early days up north, and he kept links with me. So he was really positive about everything, and said, look, you know, it was a toss-up between you and another striker. They only can, each year they take some strikers, and they're not going to take on 5 strikers for the 5, you know, professionals that the apprentices they're going to take on or whatever. So it was a case of he was very positive. He said, I think we need to try and get you some trials with other clubs, because if you're good enough to go for the best team in the country, then you're certainly going to be good enough to go for others. So I went on trial with Birmingham City, and Oxford United also showed an interest, and then I got an injury, which sort of just takes you out of the mix for a little while, and so that sort of interest died. And then, but I was still playing with the Southern League team on and off. Banbury put me out to, again, they felt that more adult football would be more beneficial to me than just sort of training and waiting for the odd game. So I went to a team called Chipping Norton Town in the Hellenic League, and Whitney Town were in that division at the time. And so again, it was a good quality football. It was sort of a next level down. It's a bit like the Hampshire League here, probably below Southern League, as it was at the time. And up there, it was Hellenic League. And then, you know, players went from there, or teams went from there. Like Whitney, who got promoted, went into the Southern League. So I played for Chipping Norton Town for a season on loan, as well as playing games back with Banbury, you know, when they wanted me to go there and stuff. So it was a part of the progression, to be honest. I think you have to be, I was very patient about what I wanted, you know, and I've come across 1 or 2 lads that I've taught that sort of were with league clubs, whether it be Bournemouth or Reading or Portsmouth or whatever, and have obviously got ability, but just, you know, didn't have that desire or commitment to sort of want to go and join a non-league club and work their way up, which is obviously a good way of doing it. But so I think I had that, and I love my football, so it was more about enjoying my football, doing the best I could, rather than where's it going to take me at the end? Am I going to become a professional or not? That was never really in my mind at the time.
And just quickly, what was the injury you got?
Injury at that time, it was a knee ligament injury. I strained my knee ligaments, and it puts you out for about 6 weeks or so. So yeah, and I got a couple of no serious injuries, but a couple of little injuries like that back in those days, which are often frustrating because it just puts you out the team, or you know, holds up your development a little bit. So yeah, frustrating, I think.
Do you think having those injuries sort of helped you though later on in your career? You know, you've got a backup from disappointment, maybe even got a bit of a thicker skin. So, do you think in any way those injuries and the disappointment helped you later on in your career?
Yeah, I think any of those sort of things would help anybody, but I think for me particularly, yeah, I think the injuries thing, there's disappointment there. There was the rejection of Derby County, so that was another one. Um, Not knowing whether I was going to make it as a professional footballer. I always remember my English teacher saying to me, he was a northern guy. I won't do the accent, but oh, Unitt, you're never going to be a professional footballer. I've only ever taught one professional footballer in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and little things like that, you remember. And I was always had a determination that, I was going to do well and I wanted to succeed in what I was doing. And I just was prepared to stick at it. So I think those things like injuries and setbacks are all part of it. If you can cope with those sort of things, and it becomes part of your character, that when you come across it again, you can cope with it.
Mm-hmm. And then also, finally, what do you think was more important also at the time in development? Was it playing for Banbury United, or was it training for, like, with first team, as you mentioned, Derby County? You occasionally got a chance to play, train with the first team. What do you think was more important in development? Watching firsthand these top players in the country train, play, see, get different ideas, be around people like Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, or was it actually just playing in men's football?
But probably a bit of both. Again, I'm sort of on the fence. Obviously, just being with those sort of footballers wouldn't help your development. You know what I mean? It'd be fantastic. It'd be a great experience,
Mm-hmm.
but it's obviously getting out there on the field. And lots of things went with it, encouragement from some of the senior players. They were ex-professionals at Banbury. A lot of ex-professionals had either been with Oxford or Reading or various teams. And a lot of those guys were, I was the first youngster to join there, and then before they set up a youth team. So, and they gave me lots of, confidence. There was a guy called Tony Foster, who was a fantastic striker, who actually played for Basingstoke as well as Banbury. I wasn't sure what his career had been, but he was a great goal scorer. But he would give us tips, you know what I mean? And there I was hoping to take his place and be in the team. But he would take us aside and show us little tricks and talk to us about, little runs he would make and how he would work off the centre forward. So all those sort of things were important in developing my understanding of the game. Not so much one-to-one coaching, but more that type of thing where you learned stuff as you went along, by playing and people helping you, in the team.
And then, so you're on loan at Chipping Norton. What happens after that loan? Did that loan spell go well? And then was there, a next move?
Yeah, so Chipping Norton, right, I'm giving my age away now. So Chipping Norton would have been about 1972-73 season.
Mm-hmm.
And we avoided relegation. I remember that. I was top goal scorer and I got player of the year. So obviously those things stuck out in my mind, being still only a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. And then, so I'm back with Banbury the next season, getting a few more games with Banbury. So that would have been 73, 74, I think. So 17-ish. Oxford United came back for me. I got on a good little run with Banbury. I played some of the midweek games. Banbury got a youth team by then, so there were more youngsters involved. And I made my FA Cup debut. So I scored an equaliser and it got them into a replay, and then I scored again in the home match for Banbury, and so was just getting into a nice little role. Oxford United had come in for me and were. And I can't remember whether I'd started playing for them or whether it was a little bit later on in the season. But then I did another knee ligament injury, which took me out for about 6 weeks and cost me the chance of playing against Northampton in the first round proper of the FA Cup, which was another little bit of a setback and a frustration, because obviously I'd done well, helped Banbury and get to that point. But I remember later on, once I'd recovered from that injury, I played for Oxford United a few times, their youth team, stroke reserve team. And I could drive by then, so I was 17. And I'd come, Fred Ford, I don't know whether you ever heard the name Fred Ford, but he'd been Bristol Rovers manager and was highly regarded in the football world. He was sort of in charge at Oxford United Reserves youth side of things. And he would chat to us and he'd say, look, we're not sure, we'd love you playing for us because we've only got a small squad, but it's good experience again. We're not sure whether, we're going to take you on at the end of the year. And so by then I decided I was going down the PE teaching route. So whatever was going to happen, I was going PE teaching route. And I'll go back to my Derby County scout, who I was still in touch with, who said, that's the best way to go. At the end of the day, you can always, once you've got your qualification, you can, if you're still good enough, you can go and make it as a professional, or you can play non-league football, earn a bit of money and top up your wage. Or if you're not, nobody's interested in you as such, you still got your career there ready for you. So that was it. So end of that 74 season, I was set and I went off to St Paul's PE College in Cheltenham. And it was about an hour, just over an hour from where I lived. So it was perfect. I got a car, I could travel, and I could come back and play for Banbury United. They wanted to keep me. So I did a bit of both. I played for my college team and then played for Banbury, when half terms and holiday times, etc.
And was there, when Oxford United came in for you again, was there any hesitation? I mean, you had the disappointment of what happened at Derby. Did you think that might happen again and you didn't want that and you were going to just choose to stick with Banbury, who at the time you were getting into the first team slowly?
No, I think I just saw that as another opportunity. And, by then, as you say, I was a couple of years older. So I just saw it as an opportunity to improve my football, get more experience. If something happened, then, if they were interested, then there was a possibility that it could go further. But as I said, in that final year, I talked with the Derby scout plus Fred Ford and come to the conclusion I was going to go down the PE teaching role first, and then if anything else happened after that, I would still be young enough, I'd still be 21 or so I could still, break into the professional game if I was good enough. So, yeah.
And so what was the experience like at Oxford United Reserves then?
Sorry, could you say that again?
What was the experience at Oxford United Reserves?
Oh, well, it's mainly youth team that I played in, but they were excellent because, a lot of young lads. There were one or two like myself who weren't signed on, who were amateurs with their clubs, either with Oxford City or Whitney, and they used to call on us every now and again. But but again, it was a brilliant experience. They also had players like Mick Tate, who came down and eventually played for Pompey. Les Taylor, who went on to Watford and played for Watford in the FA Cup final. So they had some good, some very good players that went on from the team. But yeah, it was just a really good experience. It sticks with you, doesn't it? And you move on.
Do you think you enjoyed your experience more at Oxford United than Derby County?
No, I wouldn't say more. I wouldn't say less. I just enjoyed both experiences. They were slightly different because of the age gap, and obviously in Derby, I was probably trying to impress more, wanted to impress more, because the feeling was that was what was going to get me a contract. Whereas at Oxford, I could relax a little bit, because although I wanted to do well, there wasn't such that pressure that I've got to get a contract at the end of this, or there's nothing else for me. I'd got a backup. So yeah, I would say enjoyed both experiences just as much.
Mm-hmm. And then, so what happened after Oxford United? What were the reasons you left there? Then where did you go afterwards?
Right, so left Oxford at the end of '74 and went off to Cheltenham, which was for my PE teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really lucky because the college football, the main PE colleges around the country, so it would be Cheltenham, there was Cardiff, there was Borough Road in London, Loughborough. They all had really strong football teams, and there were lots of non-league players involved in. So we had several non-league players who'd got experience even at that early age. So even though we were all joining at 18 to go to college there were a number of us that had experience playing Southern League or Isthmian League or whatever. So, and quite a few have been with league clubs, and so the standard was very good. And so I had two very good years. One year, the middle year, I was hit with injury again. But the first year there and my last year there were fantastic seasons. And in the last season, was it? I had trials in the second year, but got injured, and then played for the British Colleges team in my final year. So that was good experience as well. So although we never went abroad, so that was one of the disappointing things. But we did play around Britain. So we played polytechnics and universities and played against the FA 11. Jeff Hurst played for the FA 11. Bobby Charlton was due to play, but didn't play for some reason. But and then the FA 11 obviously is made up from a lot of non-league players who have obviously shown good commitment and over the years. So it's almost a reward for the best players around the non-league scene. So so I had really good experience there. We got to the County Cup final we beat Forest Green Rovers on the way, which for a college team was, I think it was a real shock for Forest Green, who were a decent side then, obviously not as good as they are now, but so it was a shock for them. And then we played Cinderford Town in the final, drew, and then lost in the replay, 3-2 in the replay. So they were good years for me to develop my football and get regular football. And then in between that, as I said earlier, all the way through those 3 years, I'd be going back to Banbury. I'd do pre-seasons with Banbury. I'd play some games. I'd play some first team stuff because they would, often I'd just go back, and bizarrely I'd go straight on the bench, which, I was quite, it was great for me. And I'd also get paid for playing for them as well. So, yeah, I had the best of both really, and I think those 3 years were really good in my development in terms of getting regular football, good quality football, and developing as a footballer. Yeah.
Now, you said about in the second season you got another knee injury. Did you become frustrated that you kept constantly getting these knee injuries? And do you think that almost hampered your career a bit? You could have gone a bit further. You mentioned about how the first time you got your knee injury, obviously nice for looking at you at the time. This time you got another one in your second season. Do you think you could have gone a lot further if these knee injuries hadn't kept reoccurring?
I think, well, they were definitely frustrating, and they definitely hampered. When I look back on the whole scene of things, in terms of my number of appearances and number of goals scored, it obviously affected those. But in terms of making it as a professional, I'm not sure that it had any effect in terms of, me physically and what I could do and what I couldn't do. I think I came back from most of those injuries as strong as I was before, or as quick as I was before. So I don't think that I think they were frustrating at the time, and maybe and football's such a system whereby you don't know. It's the luck of the draw sometimes, isn't it? Right people at the right time, right place at the right time. But I don't think that I wouldn't look back and say if I hadn't had that injury, I would have gone on and become a professional footballer. I don't think so. I think, being realistic, I think, football-wise, I came back from all of those. They were just little setbacks at the time, which were frustrating and maybe stopped me from having more opportunities. But other than that, I think probably I would have my football career would have continued as it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you also mentioned how still at this time you're playing for Borough United. Did you ever suffer from burnout or anything like that? The constant playing for your Cheltenham College, and then also have to go and play for them. Was there any point where you started to struggle with both those two teams, or was it never a problem for you?
No. I don't think we'd ever heard of burnout.
Yeah.
Back in those days, and I remember playing football, going way back to when I was 14 and 15, almost in our local little school field every night. And my girls found an old little diary the other day when we were clearing out the attic. And in this diary from when I was 14, it was went down the field, played football, went down the field, played football. And it's just non-stop of being active and doing that. And then when it became more structured football, no, I never felt a burn at anything, even considered that. I always felt that, obviously, I didn't do much in the way of five-a-sides and stuff like that in the summer, so I got my break. But I still do sport. I still play tennis or a bit of cricket, so I still got my breaks. But yeah, burnout was never something that crossed my mind or I was aware of at all. Just always had that want and passion to play. So no.
Why do you think that has become sort of a bit more of an excuse nowadays? You've mentioned you play sports essentially 24/7. Do you think it's just, what do you think there's this excuse for burnout come
from? Well, there's definitely I think maybe the volume of matches that children were. I think there was back in, when would it be? My early years back in the 80s, 90s, there was definitely kids were being headhunted to play for all sorts of teams. So there was they'd be playing Saturdays, they could be playing Sundays, they would play for their school team, they would play for. And some, I wasn't really a lover of pushing, my under 14 kids into the under 16 teams just to get a winning team. I was very much about 14s would play under 14s. The less able kids would come on and get a game rather than always be about, hammering a team and winning 10-0 or something. So I was very much about, and the less able kids in the under 16s would play for the 16s, not just pack it out with better kids from younger years. So I think there's always a temptation. There was that, and then of course those good players would play for the rep teams. I ran some rep teams when I was finishing my own career, and so those good players would then play for rep teams. So they're playing for their Saturday and Sunday teams. They're playing for their school team, maybe 2 school teams. They're playing for the rep team on the Saturday mornings, and some were going off to play for their other team on Saturday afternoons. And then, of course, they're signed by pro teams, so they're going to be going to Pompey Academy for 2 nights a week. And so that's probably where the burnout would have come. And so, of course, what they did was took children out of schools football, which I think is the wrong route, because for me personally, they got a lot from school football, and we did things the right way. Not to say that a lot of people in local league football didn't do it the right way, but I think there was less pressure on them in schools football. They weren't being screamed at and abused and whatever. It was and they got a real mix of football. It wasn't all the best kids were headhunted to play for one team. So I think they got good experiences, even though maybe they didn't always recognise it at the time. I think they did get good experiences, but it did cut out so the better kids didn't play rep football, and so it just reduced the amount of organised football, which probably wasn't a bad thing at that point, because they were playing lots of teams and then of course when you talk to them, the football season is just about to finish, and they're playing five-a-sides galore, so they would never, their football seasons never finished almost. They would be straight back in and playing again the next season.
And you said about pulling them out of schools football. Do you think over time school football has taken less importance?
I think, yeah, probably, because as I was finishing, my role in PE teaching changed over the last 10 years. And so I was doing a lot of training primary teachers, and having less to do with my secondary school at a sport level. I was doing more leadership and working with primary schools and linking and leadership opportunities. But I think that there was a different emphasis when I first started teaching. My diary was, school matches after school, and what I'd do with the kids at lunchtime, high jump club or something. By the time, into the 90s and the early 2000s, it was less about that, and it was more about your performance management, your lesson assessments. It was about kids being assessed. And so the emphasis on PE teachers wasn't about taking the children up for after school stuff and getting them active and doing that. It was about their own performance, and their own progressions as well. So teachers were quite often PE teachers were not looking for a career in PE. It was their stepping stone, and they were, within a couple of years, they were getting promotion and going off in pastoral routes or other career routes. So I think all that contributed to the decline in, not, people often used to say, they're selling off the school fields. There wasn't so much of that, but it was more about the expectations on teachers, and that, they could put all the time in the world with their school teams and with the children extracurricular wise, but it wasn't particularly rewarded. That wasn't seen as valuable. So I think that was a bigger factor. Yeah.
Now, going back, so where did you go next after Cheltenham College? Was it
Right. So then I had to find a
Italy?
job then.
Mhm.
So and back in those days, in the late 70s, it was, 100 people applying for every PE job. So I was applying all around the country,
Mhm.
and in my mind was, where can I play a decent level of football?
Mhm.
I don't want to go down to Cornwall. I don't want to be stuck on the peripheries anywhere. I want to make sure that I can, as well as do my PE teaching. So eventually, after 3 or 4 interviews, I got a job down here at Purbrook. So um, that was my first job, and so I moved down here. So my first thing was, right. I need to find a football team. Obviously, I wanted to play my football.
Mhm.
And Waterloo, I lived on the edge of Waterlooville, so Waterlooville seemed the obvious option. I went along, and they said, "Oh, well, you can come along to training." I don't think they had a reserve team at the time.
Mhm.
And so I went along to training. They'd obviously got a very good team at Waterlooville back in, so it would have been 1977, 78. And they obviously had a good team at the time. They were riding high in the Southern League. So after training with them, not being really, we were training in a industrial estate, so there was very little ball work. No one could see me playing football. The weather was, we weren't anywhere where I could show what I was all about, and was going nowhere fast really. So it got to around Christmas time. I thought, right, I need to have a look round, and so Bognor were on the other local side in the Southern League. So I phoned up Bognor, and they invited me down, and I started training with Bognor. That was Jack Pearce, and signed for them. Played a few. I played. They put me in the reserves to start with. I did all right in the reserves, and then that took me almost to the end of the season, and I played, I don't know, 5 or 6 games at the end of the season. By the time I got my fitness, um, and so that was set me up really for the next season, where I was aiming on making it and playing in the first team at Bognor. So
And what was that next season like?
excellent, thank you. Yeah, I had a fantastic season. Took me a couple of games before I scored, but once I'd scored, and of course I didn't know, other than Waterlooville being the other. I knew they got a good team, but I
Mhm.
didn't really know anybody football-wise down here. So Gosport were in the Southern League by then, and I just started scoring goals. So I scored a couple against. I think I scored a couple against Gosport home and away.
Mhm.
Same with Waterlooville. And so, and just went on. No injuries, fortunately,
Mhm.
and just consistently, kept scoring on and off. Obviously, had those local derby matches were brilliant for me, because obviously it gets your name mentioned. Obviously, the Sports Mail at the time was, there used to be regular headlines in the Sports Mail. End of the season, I was up there in Southern League goal scoring numbers, top 6 or something like that, 22, 24, something like that, and got Player of the Year at Gosport as well. So yeah, very good first full season at not Gosport, Bognor, I should say.
Mhm.
So really enjoyed it. The team was, we had a good team. A lot of young players. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it.
And so, was it then that season afterwards you moved to Gosport?
No, I had another season, but again, that was an injury-struck season. I'm trying to think what injury I got that season. I don't know. I can't remember. But I started off all right. I started off quite well, scored some goals. And I think I might have even got into double figures that season. But then after halfway through or something, got this injury, which kept me out for quite. Then I was in and out, and one or two. I'm trying to think. Bognor had signed one or two other players. We got to the County Cup final, but I didn't really feature much, and so that was my second season there, and that was the season that just I had a few fallouts, I think, and it just didn't work out for me, and I didn't feel I was getting my football in. I wasn't enjoying my football, and that was the key for me. I wanted to enjoy my football. I didn't see my football progressing, and Waterloo came in for me. So, and I thought, okay, I live locally. Waterloo have got a good team. I want to enjoy my football again. Okay, I'll make that move. So, I went to Waterloo.
And was it different the second time around, or was it?
It was totally different because I never got to play the first time round. There were different managers second time round. I went there as an established Southern League player rather than somebody who they didn't even know. So it was, very different. A lot of the players were the same. So there were some great players there, your Kimmy Mans, Mickey Seymour, Mickey Bennett, lots of very good players there. And John Milkins was in goal. But for me, it didn't really work out, and I don't really know why. I think that maybe the system that we played didn't just suit me, or the players that I played with didn't sort of suit me. And although I scored a few goals, but I had a pretty barren time there. They had a big wage bill I think they had to cut, and so those people there was a few of us on good money that were obviously they didn't feel they were getting value for money, so we were the ones who were transfer listed.
And then, so by this point, it's going to Gosport, is that right now?
Yeah, so Gosport came straight in for me. Soon, I think in those days, the Sports Mail was told everybody what was going on. So, the headlines were that we were available, and Pete Edgar was a school teacher, so although I didn't know him as such, he contacted the school and said, "Look, we're interested," and I met with them, and I liked what I heard. And as much as what Pete and Tony had to say, I'd obviously played against Gosport a few times. I knew they were a good side, and so I had no hesitation really in joining them. It's just it was going to be down to me really to show what I could do, and
was it
to get performing again. So sorry,
was it easy going into that side, because you come in at 1980, so it was a side that just won 2 league titles, just got into the Southern League, was it? And these a lot of players knew each other from a young age, some of them even teachers or Southern League players. So was it a bit of a shock at first, or were you able to integrate in the squad quite easily?
They were interesting days, to be honest, because I went there very determined to do well and wanted to do well. So I'd always give my best in training. I was always somebody who was always committed to the team, and generally I felt I used to get on well with other team players. I wasn't somebody who was sort of a bit aloof or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing I felt was that you had to prove yourself when you went there.
Mm-hmm.
And however friendly, Tony Mahoney was fantastic as a leader and somebody who welcomed you to the team. And there was that, obviously, that Gosport bond of they'd all played together for so long. So I think there was a little bit of suspicion about people coming in from the outside, whether you were doing it for the right reasons, whether you were just doing it for yourself, whether you were going to fit in and be part of that team. And for me, football had always been about fitting in and being part of the team, whether it was at Banbury or wherever I'd been, at Bognor. There was the social side, and it was about that camaraderie as well as performing as well. So I think it was a case of proving myself without, I didn't have to try too hard, because I just felt it was me being me. And the good thing that happened was that I clicked almost straight away. The type of players they had worked well for me. They're good players in midfield who provided good service. There was a target man up front, whether it was Richie Colbert or Steve Boswell, and then John Hawes, who would often go wide, so that it complemented me. It wasn't like I was competing with somebody else for my role. I was the small, if it was a Keegan Toshak pairing, I was the Keegan, and the other players, Colbert was the Toshak, or or Steve Boswell, they were the target players, and I'd work off them. So I wasn't competing with anybody else as such. John Hawes played a different way to me. I love playing down the middle and looking for those flick offs and through balls, where he would often pick the ball up and take players on and break wide. So it just complemented. I scored goals when I came, so I had a good half season, and that seemed to sort of blend me into the team. I think by the end of that season, people had accepted me as being there for the right reasons. There was a little group of us so there was only 3 of us from over this side. So we were known as the Havant Boys. Mm-hmm. That was myself, Ken Finley, and Mark Foster. So we'd often travel to and from training together and for games. But we all had we were all sort of Gosport players as such. We had the same attitude and stuck there. We all stayed there for a number of years from then on.
Mm-hmm. And then, so between 80 and 83, side finished, I think, no lower than top 7. You also had at the time the big rivalry with Fareham, which you said one of the big games you remember was the 5-1 win against them away. Right?
Yeah, I remember it well.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are two things in that game, weren't there? There was the hat-trick you scored in the 5-1 game.
Yes.
And how that you almost, one player tried to get that away from you, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So it's always been a little bit of Mickey taking about it, but so I got a hat-trick. John Hawes got 2, and Gary Jurieff struck a superb shot that struck the crossbar, came down, no VAR or anything like that, came down, bounced this side of the line, definitely didn't go over. And I obviously,
hand on heart,
I was there. Oh, hand on heart, yeah. But so my immediate reaction was, he ran straight to the referee, who obviously would have been closer to him, and said, "Ref, that was over the line, wasn't it?" And I went for the linesman. because the linesman obviously had the better view and would have made that decision. So I just to double make sure that the linesman knew that it was my goal and it hadn't gone over, and he confirmed it. So Gary was he still mentions it to today that he feels that he was robbed. But yeah, but we had such a good team, you know, bonding, and you know, we all enjoyed playing with each other, and there was a great spirit. So yeah, those sort of things are all part and parcel of being part of that team.
Did you feel like it was quickly becoming almost like the team you felt most comfortable with when you compared to all the other teams you played for?
Yeah, I think so, because I felt that I'd learnt the game. I love being at Banbury United. For those, I was there about 6 or 7 years, but I was very young. I was learning the game. I wasn't an established player. I scored a few goals now and again. So much as I loved it at Banbury, I enjoyed Gosport. I felt at home because I was performing as well as enjoying the camaraderie of the team and just being part of that team. So yeah, it was, and that's why a number of times people were interested in trying to lure a number of players away from the club, and approaches were put in for some of us. And I'd got no intentions. I was sort of mid to late 20s by then. I loved playing there. Was playing a good standard of football. That's what I wanted from my football.
And then also, of course, a bit of a down blip was in the 83-84 season when the club was relegated. Do you remember much from that season?
Yeah, I remember a lot about that season, to be honest, because I think for most of my seasons, a few of them I was top goal scorer. I need to find out one day whether when I was top goal scorer or not. But most seasons I was scoring, often playing 20 odd games, 30 games, but getting, somewhere double figures, 15, 16 goals. So football wise, I was doing okay. And in that season, we started off well, and as I say, we started off well, but we didn't get great results. But I'd been picking up goals, so I'd got 12 or 16 or something in that region, and we'd gone on a bit of a run, and we'd had 6 or 7 games. And I remember winning 1-0 away at Stourbridge and getting the goal there. And I remember the reports at the time saying Gosport, may have turned the corner, or Gosport on a bit of a roll, etc. And although we were low in the table, and then I did my knee ligaments. And that's I ruptured the cruciate ligament, so I was hooked off to Hasler Hospital, operation, and that was me out for the rest of the season. And we I don't know whether we had other injuries as well, but our season just didn't take. We didn't go anywhere for the rest of that season, and yeah. Although I got Player of the Year and Supporters Player of the Year, so I think that was one of the jokes with the lads was that, play half a season, get the trophies. Maybe that's the way to do it. Or they were all doing 46 odd games a season, and I'd do 20 and pick up supporters and Managers Player of the Year. But anyway, yeah, so disappointing in the end, obviously, for us as a team. But for me, I'd had an okay season up until that injury. But yeah, another injury that obviously I had to deal with.
Yeah, and as well that season, sure, Rich Colbert was out because of injury. Do you think if the side didn't get those injuries, it would have probably stayed up?
I think we might have stayed up personally. Yeah, well, as I say, we weren't doing well, and I came from the Midlands near Banbury, and so Leamington were one of my local teams, and we played AP Leamington, who hadn't lost at home in sort of to a Southern League club. They lost to Gillingham in something like about 18 months. They'd not lost any other home matches, and we went and beat them. And the report said we were third from bottom, I think, at the time. And that was we did that. We beat Stourbridge. We had several other wins. And we were on a bit of a roll, and I think maybe if we'd have, and I think Graham Wake got injured as well, and Steve Ingman got injured and had a little spell out. So yeah, I think if we hadn't have, we might have just stayed up that season. And it wasn't like we probably lost one or two games heavily, but it wasn't like we were getting beaten week in, week out by big numbers. We, the odd goal here, and a couple of teams turned us over, I think. But yeah, that was disappointing for us as a club. But I don't remember it affecting us like that. It wasn't like, okay, we're all, half the team are going to leave now. I think that Gosport nucleus always kept the side together. It was because they had that nucleus. It kept a good quality of player in the club, and then the likes of myself and Ken Finley and Mark Foster. There was never any talk of us looking to go anywhere else. So we were all more than happy to just pick up from where we left off. At the end of that season and go again in the southern south. So. Yeah.
Was your injury, did it affect you into that next season, or were you back at the start of that season?
No, it was I was out for 9 months. It's a ruptured cruciate ligament, and although I could sort of run and keep in straight lines and strike a ball, I couldn't chip a ball, and obviously there was the mental side. I was still getting pain in the knee, and so I didn't play until around Christmas time. So it kept me out for the first half of that following season. And what I do remember was I spent a lot of time. I was down at Hasler. Ray Hollier was our physio down there, and he did a lot of work with me. And I used a local swimming pool to first thing in the morning before I was off work, obviously, initially, and I've been on crutches, so I was doing a lot of rehabilitation. So I was putting a lot of hours in, and then just did a little bit of running when the other guys were training, but couldn't do much ball work. And then it was into the next season. When around October time that I started, I think I might have had a friendly game, and that was the start of my comeback, really.
So basically, you started in the first team again when they went on that unbeaten run.
I did. I only lost in one game the rest of that season. I even missed one of the games. I only missed one game in that running, and that was one of the games that we lost. I'm not sure who it was to. But yeah, that was yeah. It was just coincidence, obviously.
It definitely wasn't the reason, was it?
No, but we seem to have everybody back in terms of those who were fit. We had Simon Pope joined us. I'd never played with Simon Pope before, but again, he was another Colbert or Boswell type player as a target man, and I just so I just came back into the side around Christmas, and I was a little bit worried because obviously what was going to happen with this knee, and Brickwood and Edgar both. The interesting thing was that they gave me a reserve game, a friendly game, and I played, and they took me off after it, and I'd not really had a crunch, you know what I mean? I was a bit, so I wanted to be crunched really, so that I knew that I could stand up to anything that. And they took me off after about an hour, and I was really, I was shaking my head and annoyed that I'd not had the full workout and given it that, I could prove to myself. And then the team sheet, they used to put a team sheet up in the changing rooms, and the end of training on Thursday, a team sheet up, and I was on the team sheet, and it was like, so they obviously, that was often the way of working. They weren't like talking me through it or anything. Right, we think you're ready, go for it. And I scored early on in my comeback game against Cambridge. I got a couple in that game. We won, and then we went on from there. So yeah,
and then
things worked out.
It did. And then in the final game, did you play in this final game against Salisbury? The one.
Yeah, I played in Salisbury. Yeah, I played in the Salisbury game. Fantastic. A big crowd. We'd been. I don't remember too much about. Obviously, we gradually moved from sort of mid-table up towards the sub. And I remember knowing that. I think we had to win by 3 or something in the final game of the season.
Yeah.
But we'd been on a fantastic run with either 10 wins on the trot, something like that. I don't know. You probably know better than I do.
It was 16 wins in the final 19 matches the side got to get to that position.
Yeah. So and it just gradually built within the team. That the feeling was good. I think we just went out. We were playing good football. And I think we all just felt confident about the way we were playing and the results were coming. And there was when we went out for that Salisbury game, although we knew we'd got to score 3, I didn't feel any pressure when we went out. I just remember going out and let's just play like we do. And I think we scored reasonably early on, which helped, and then the second goal, I scored 1, and it was I think it was outside the box, which was very rare for me. So so and that 5-0 victory was fantastic. So very good.
And then so promoted in 85, and then 3 years later, which would have been your final season for the club, the side won the Hampshire Senior Cup, beating in the final 2-0 Farnborough in the Dell. What was that like?
I wasn't there at that point. Now I'd been transferred.
I thought
so.
So what Trevor did you get transferred then?
So Trevor joined the club. Early on in the season, I'd had appendicitis. I'd been training. I'd been down the club training, and of course, when they rushed me into hospital and cut through. So that put me out for ages, because once they've gone through your stomach muscles, it took me ages to build those back up and to get playing again. So I didn't get many games. I played a few games. I scored. I came on. Was it? I'm not sure whether it was that season or not. I scored against Andover in the Hampshire Cup. I think we were either in extra time or up at Andover, and I came on and scored the only goal. But played 1 or 2 more games, wasn't getting much of a run, and Andover came in for me, and I just felt that I was whatever I was at that stage, 32 maybe, I don't know. that I needed to be playing rather than just sitting and not getting the opportunity. So I joined Andover and went there for the second half of the season. So yeah, I missed out on the Hampshire Cup, which is another little frustration.
Did you not get a winners medal or anything like that for being part of that squad that won it, or was it only at the time the finalists?
No, they just forget about you once you've gone. That's it. There's no no. I don't know whether that happens anywhere or not. Yeah, maybe they're just thinking.
I think it's changed now where I don't know. They might have to. No, we've made they do the whole squad, so we'll count it anyway. Okay. We'll put it in this podcast. Yeah, we'll count it.
Maybe it was just rubbing salt into the wounds that they get rid of me and then win the Hampshire Cup. So here's what we did.
You helped towards it. We'll count it as that. We'll count it as a technically won it when you helped towards it. When you got brought.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're the only person that's ever said that. But anyway, yeah. No, I'm glad the team did. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Good on them. And a lot of the lads. The great thing for Gosport, I think it had changed a little bit in that Trevor brought in quite a few guys that he'd worked with at Fareham, and so there's a little bit of a change up until then. And I'd had a few seasons I had quite a few injuries. Not played regularly, scored the odd goal here, there, but not had. So the 84-85 was my last really good season. I had probably 5 good seasons, and then those last 3 seasons or so, scoring odd goals and but not playing regularly. And I just felt that I'd come to a stage where I needed to play, and Andover were interested, so I could still play in the Southern League. So
were they in the Premier Division or the South Division?
No, they were in the Southern South. And it's funny, having spoken on this to you, obviously a pattern seems to come out that really never I really thought of much before. So I went to Andover and I scored 6 in about 12 games or something like that, and then we went to Salisbury at Easter, and I ruptured the other cruciate ligament in my other knee, which was again is another 9-month injury, exactly the same injury, same rehabilitation, but I was of course in my 30s then, and so that really was effectively that was the end of my career really. So but yeah, that injury thing's come back again
and so in 1990 when you retired, did you ever have any thoughts of going in coaching, or were you just going to fully focus on your PE job?
No, I didn't really think about carrying on the coaching at Southern League or that higher level. I was happy with what I was doing. I was taking youth football, schools football, and that, to be honest, kept me busy in itself. So I had no real thought about, and my feelings were that if you were going to do a non-league role as coach or manager or whatever, there's a lot more commitment to it than just turning up on a Saturday, and I wasn't sure that I had the time to be able to do that, with my own career as well.
And so throughout your whole time in sort of Hampshire, Andover, Gosport, Borough, Waterlooville, were you teaching at the same school, or did you go to different schools?
No, I stayed. I started at Purbrook and then I moved to Horndean, and I stayed at Horndean for the rest of my career. So I got different promotions up to head of department, and then, but I still loved teaching PE. And then I changed my role in the last sort of 10 years of my teaching As I say, I went into training primary teachers to teach PE, and it coincided obviously with it's coincided with me having my own family, so it worked out perfectly, really. So yeah, and I stayed. So I had some time in that same school, but then was spending various days in other schools, training their teachers to work with PE. So yeah.
And so I've got two more questions. First one is your time as a player. Do you think it helped you as a PE teacher or vice versa?
I think being a PE teacher helped me in some ways as a footballer, because I always felt I had to. I don't know what the other lads would say, but I always felt I had to set a good example in terms of, I couldn't be being sent off week after week when at school I was preaching to all those lads that I was taking, about self-discipline and fair play and those sort of things. So I think I was booked 3 times in my whole career, and it was usually for going in with goalkeepers. It was 50-50 things where, and often the referee would give them because, it was a home crowd, they were hostile, and so to calm it down, he just booked me. But no, I always felt I had to set a good example. So I thought that was one of the trade-offs of PE and being a PE teacher. I'm not so sure that whether my I think that the knock-on effect for the being a semi-pro footballer and having a high profile in this area and being a PE teacher was the relationships I built up with the kids. It was easy for the kids to talk to me about the football and have a little joke about what the headlines were, whether it was me scoring, whether it was me missing, whether it was me, letting the team down because I'd missed a couple of, easy chances. So there was always that. And the kid, and the funny thing today is that, there I am in my 60s and I bump into ex-students all the time because I live in the area. And even now, one or two go, "You're still playing football?" As if, I'm still some youngster that would be running around. And I know some old people, older people, that some of the lads are still playing a bit of five-a-side and stuff. But when I finished, I didn't really do anything. I didn't want to play. I was frustrated. I played a bit of schools football just with the staff and people who couldn't pass the ball and serve it. It was very frustrating. So I played a couple of those games, and that was it. I didn't play any other non-league football. I missed it. But I decided that I'd rather finish and having enjoyed my football than just be very frustrated and not enjoy the latter years. So that's where I went with that.
And so, final question before I let you go is: who are 3 top players you played out with Gosport?
With Gosport, so a bit I suppose I don't want to be disrespectful because there was some, all the players contributed, and we had some fantastic players there. But Tony Mahoney was a fantastic leader. He's a fantastic guy. He always had good words to say. He was encouraging. And gradually, as you got to know him over the years, just a nice bloke to be around. So Tony Mahoney was, a fantastic leader for the club. I could mention lots of players. Then you've got Gary Jurieff. He did set me up for a fair few goals. So I posted a photo on a website the other week for him, and it was me scoring, and I was wheeling away, and I hadn't even noticed, but out by the corner flag, he'd obviously gone down the line. He'd put the ball into the near post, and he was off. I think he was off the pitch in the far corner, and all he could say was another one laid on by Juria. So, but he was, he was such a good attacking fullback. He created opportunities for us. Of a great penalty taker. Yeah, Gary, and of course I got to know Gary over the years as well. I think he sold my house for me or something like that, or bought me a house. So can't remember. Didn't pay for it, but helped me buy it. In his professional role. John Hawes, he played with us for most of those years up front. Again, even though neither of us were big, tall target players, we often played well together. The team would adapt to whether it was me up front with John or whether we had a bigger centre forward. And he laid a lot of, he's very unselfish as well. So whereas I probably was a bit more selfish and was a bit more goal focused, I think everybody used to know that I was never happy if I hadn't scored, and that was a big thing for me. Whereas John Hawes would, he would often beat a couple of players, get into the box and just lay it off, and, give us some easy chances. So John was fantastic. The midfield players of Ken Finley, Graham Way, Tony Callahan, Steve Ingman came in as one of the younger players at the end. I could just keep naming players, and they were the ones that sort of, you had the players that were there when I came, like Colby and Steve Boswell and Bucko, and then gradually as they retired, then but those players I've mentioned were the nucleus of the team that stayed with it. I'm bound to miss one or two off, but a great set of lads to be involved with. Thoroughly enjoyed my years at Gosport.
Well, that's all we had time for this episode of the Privett Park Legends podcast. I'd like to thank my guest, Ally Unitt. Ally, have you had a good time?
I've loved it, yes, thank you. Been a good little trip down memory lane, and it's just made me think a little bit about those years and the enjoyment I got from them. Yeah, thank you for inviting me on to that.
Well, the only thing I have to do now is thank the listeners for listening to another episode of the Privett Park Legends, and to watch out for the upcoming weeks for more episodes. Thank you and goodbye.